Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Chilling Reign, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your order using that code Omnipoke. For today's video, we are going to be talking about Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX and looking at 5 lists, because this archetype is going to be like Zoroark, where you have this core package where you draw a bunch of cards and build around it however you like based on the metagame, or really as we find out what is the strongest build. So straight away when this came out on PTCGO, I went into Twitch stream and we started playing around with the deck, and really I tried out first of all a no bells, no whistles, no thrills kind of list, and just said, let's draw more cards than the opponent, just like traditional Zoroarks did. And we went 50-0 with the deck. So, yeah, this is going to be my starting point, the first of 5 lists that we look at today, where really there's not too much going on here. There's nothing super powerful going on. You just beat people because you outdraw them pretty much every time. I think the only real like cheesy and cheatsy doodly thing we have going on is that you try and pump that early Horror House GX. Buying a turn is really, really strong, and it just allows you to get those horses up into play, get them evolved up so they can't just be gusted and easily knocked out for tempo on your opponent's side. We slow them down, say stop, and try and get as many of the big ponies into play as possible, so we're drawing more cards than other people. Hopefully it means we have the proactive nature and try and go for the boss first on their things, or we can even take cheeky poltergeist knockouts, obviously for like ADP decks and stuff like that, where they play a ton of trainer cards. You can get them before they GX or before they Ultimate Ray, which can be crazy, crazy powerful. But even just going into one prize Pokemon like Jirachis and stuff, really good deal, because then you can weave around towards knocking out like a Dedenne and then move into a big Pokemon, be a tag team or a VMAX. And surprisingly, we actually did get into late game situations where we hit 330. So yeah, we were doing the numbers in the end. We did reach one shots with this deck, and like I said, we played a number of different decks on the ladder. It was just day one ladder thing, so I wouldn't take too much of it into account. But Gengar was winning like a lot of games. People insta scooped on Horror House like a good amount of times, and pretty much we were comfortable against like most of the decks. You've got the Zapdos in here, of course. It can skew that prize trade to try and make it an 8 prize game in just general matchups, because you can gust like Crobat and stuff like that and take an easy knockout. It can finish things off whilst only giving up 1 energy when it's removed from play, so you don't really lose too much for Max Geist. So really fits the deck perfectly, and it does mean that you have a chance against Eterna. We actually beat the Eterna that we played against on the stream. So yeah, this is a really solid core, I think. There may be other couple cards that you're like questioning why there's not things like Trev Noir in here. We're not really leaning into that Trev Noir package too much with this build. I'm just saying that Max Geist is a good enough thing to lean into, and you just have a decent amount of hit points on your Callies. They can tank hits, they can come in and attack. So yeah, and if you're worried about having answers to like Altaria, Decidueye, that sort of thing, you actually have the inbuilt answer with Astral Barrage, because you're placing counters. You can sprinkle around them. Obviously, they could be playing things like Parasols as the format moves on, so maybe we need to play some tool removal eventually. But right now, this is like a very vanilla list where you're just drawing more cards than other people to win the game without really any huge like power spikes. You try and one-trick pony the Horror House and get as many into play as possible and draw a ton of cards. That's basically the long and short of it. Oh, and we're playing no Stadium, we're just playing double Marshadow. I think Marshadow is like way better than playing Stadium in general, I think, in this deck, because if you play the Rod, you have 4 times where you can try and resetting hole. Obviously, you don't need abilities every single turn. So as long as you plant one in the late game, you're pretty safe against like Stamp Path plays. And of course, you have so much search. Even when you play 2 copies of the Marshadow, you play 4 Fog, 4 Quick, 3 Calm, and like draw supporters that can also get you there. So you play like 20 outs to have a chance to find this guy, even turn 1. So you don't get cheesed by just like turn 1 path too often. So it feels like pretty good in general. Yeah, so that's where we're at with the baseline list. That's the no thrills. I'm just going to draw cards, get my pony set up kind of build. And I think Horror House is like really, really broken. So yeah, let's move on to a secondary list, which is going to be more on that disruption side. I know a lot of content creators have already released lists similar to this, where they're going to try and have a lot more defensive tools at their disposal. I still feel like Horror House is a great way that you can buy time, but you do also open up the door for Pale Moon GX to be a late game play that you throw at them at the same time as a Stamp Path kind of play. So yeah, that's definitely dangerous. The benefit of Trev Noir, of course, is that you just buy turns completely for free in the later stages where you're trying to, allow things like Gengar to get knocked out relatively early or whatever, and then you go for Stamp or Marnie plus Night Watch and bung the Stadium into play. You play 2 of your own Marshadow and the Rod once again, so you can bounce it off yourself. I'm not playing the full 4 path because as decent as like a cheesy turn 1 path play kind of is, you really want your ball search in the opening stages to be focused completely on Calyrex. So actually putting down a cheesy path means that you need to find your own Marshadow, and that's a search card that isn't going towards a horse. So you don't need the full 4 copies. You only need to put paths into play when you're actually night watching. That's like the only time I think it's relevant. So you don't need maximum copies. I think 3 is fine, and you just make them late game plays, like a Zorogarb, where you're only activating that tool once you've already drawn all your cards. You're already hitting into them and using N and that sort of thing. This is kind of the remaster of Zorogarb. That's why so many people are excited to play this sort of archetype, because you can activate abilities on your turn, shut them back off before you pass it over to your opponent, whilst giving them not much hand to work with. So yeah, pretty simple core here. The only worries with this sort of build is because you're committing so many spaces to like extra stamps, paths, extra Pokemon. You don't have the space for that Zapdos security, so you're really trying to just halt Eternatus with these disruption-based cards instead, but that will be a much dicier matchup, I think. So just something to bear in mind. Let's have a look at another kind of simple core. All of these I am like fairly simplistic with, and you could play more tech cards here and there, but I'm just giving you the concepts of different ways to play Cali, because certainly a build around card, and there's certainly going to be all sorts of different ways to end up using him. So this is going to be a energy flood approach, where rather than having tag team Pokemon that are relatively easily knocked out, you can have the Cress in here for that turn 1 Crescent Glow, get some energies into play, and really just hope that Max Geist by like turn 2 even, you could be like bossing a Dedenne and taking a KO just proactively with a Calyrex, and just hoping that enough energy stays in play thanks to the Cress, early attack. You're going to be able to be two-shotting straight out the gate, whereas with some other builds, you're forced to use Gengar to attack with, and you don't really know what that damage is going to be like at times. The Trev Noir isn't two-shotting VMAXs. You have to make sure the Cali's ready in the back, and if Trev Noir gets knocked out, you may be falling a little bit short. So this list is just saying, let's ramp it up, make sure Cress is rolling quickly. And yeah, you could also try and do a bit of a mix and match where you play like 1 Gengar, 1 Cress. I think that's also like fairly reasonable. But I do feel like if you're playing the Cress, you kind of do want to be going second, and if you go first, it's like fine, but then we don't have much like power, or like our early game just isn't that strong without going second with this kind of build, so you may want to try and mix and match some tag teams in here as well. I've pretty much laid my stake that I think Horror House is just like way too broken to not use, but yeah, I think the Cress is also a decent shout. For list number 4, it's going to be a Mewtwo style approach. Now, this is only playing 1 Trev, 1 Gengar, but actually one of the best GX attacks is actually Miraculous Duo GX in this deck, because you can get to 4 energy on the Mewtwo quite easily. You can tank a hit with Mewtwo or tank a hit with a Calyrex, and there's nothing scarier than getting to like 7 energy in play, then healing off your big Pokemon that have all the energy attached, because then your opponent can't ever wipe off any damage. So even if they're stamping you, you don't need boss a game. You just like have enough energy to announce an attack and win. So that's really the approach here. So Mewtwo very strong just for its own attack, but you will want to be finding this in the opening stages, attaching to it so that you can Horror House into Night Watch, which is much more fluid than attaching these energies, parking them on a Gengar, because Poltergeist is unpredictable and you don't know how much you're going to be ending up doing. So yeah, I think Mewtwo, pretty interesting. Weirdly enough, I've thought about playing Mewtwo as just like a one-off with no GXs in the list. Like you could even play 1 Mewtwo in like the Cress list, because you just commit to the duo and it's like a good attack anyway. So that's like enough of a power spike to be worthwhile. And it does sort of mean that sometimes you won't be wanting to Horror House with this list. You may just like pass into the opponents with Pokemon, or you just try and go for early like Shadow Mist or something to slow people down. It's relevant. It can help out, of course. But yeah, that Miraculous Duo, I would not sleep on that sort of attack. It's very, very strong. So yeah. And the final list is kind of more of a fun one. I think this is kind of greedier than the others that we've shown so far, because Alcremie is just trying to reach one-shot potential with the Max Whisk attack. You are gaining a different weakness, and there's not many decks that can post a dark weakness as well as a metal weakness. So yeah, Alcremie could be the go-to when you're up against a Turner, and hopefully a Whisk can like one-shot them at one stage in the game. So once again, you're having the Crest to try and get energies into play straight away. And yeah, you're trying to use that Calyrex to make the Whisk very dangerous. Maybe you can use an Adornment attack if need be as well at like some stage in the game. But yeah, the 2/2 Creamy. The good news is we have so much Ball Search for these basics that it's quite reasonable for you to get multiple Callies down as well as an Alcremie. This list is playing energy retrievals rather than ordinary rod because you want more instant access to those psych energies again because the Whisk discards. Which means we're playing Swells and one Marshadow. So this is the only list that actually plays any stadiums other than Path. Yeah, we're just playing the one Marshadow for that early access, just in case you get cheesed by the early Path from the opponent's side. And this is playing the Swells because I don't have that Pokemon recovery. Because the Ordinary Rod is that really nice point in the deck where basically every game it can be extra energies for late game stamp proofing. Against like Eterna, it can be rodding back Zapdos. Against Path decks, you can be rodding back Marshadow. At any point, if you just research, you can rod back Calyrex and you want to get 3 or 4 in play. So yeah, that Ordinary Rod is normally the best go-to option, I think, compared to pure energy recovery. But in this list where you have natural discard, I think the retrieval makes the most sense. So yeah, that's 5 builds. Really, I've stuck to a very similar like 50 card baseline, very similar to how Zoroark did it back in the day, where you would sub in your Lycanrocs, you'd sub in your Golisopod, you'd sub in Guardy even, or you'd sub in that Garb package, but most of them stuck around like 40 to 50 cards the same, and then you mix and matched for the meta, basically. And I think Calyrex will do the same. I love drawing cards. This card has already impressed me like way too much that I'm not going to jump off that bandwagon at all. I think I'm going to be sticking to this archetype in its various forms. And this is really just how I've enjoyed it the most. Just no bells and whistles, I'll set up .deck. Like, taking out fun text just to play more incense is really boring, but it just means that you get better turn 2 and 3 plays. And Horror House is like disgusting. It's been absolutely atrociously good for me on the ladder. Like, it's so scary to come up against for so many archetypes. And if you can greed that second attachment for the Horror House GX, or maybe you've gone first and you get that VMAX in play for the turn 2 attack or whatever, it can be a really devastating option where you force the opponent's hand size upwards. You can then like into a Marnie and move into the Calyrex, or you could keep that large hand size and punish with Poltergeist. It's a little bit hit and miss, but typically it's going to be in your favor if they've got that hand size of 8 or 9 cards. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on Calyrex. What's been your favorite way to play it? Go back and check out the Twitch stream if you haven't already seen some of the Calyrex action. I'm not going to do any videos of gameplay today because there's just too many variations going on. I don't want to confuse you by jumping between different lists. So we'll come back to this at a later date. I'm sure I will do a deck analysis at some point that really goes into the battle side as well. But I just really wanted to demonstrate all the different builds because there's so much out there already, and I just want to have a good variety out there so you can try all of these on for size and find out which is your favorite for your playstyle. So thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys did enjoy, and I will see you in another video soon. Cheers.